there was one specific thing that I was asked to talk about, and that's the requirement for skills, skill development, training, and expansion of the market as a whole, which of course I'm not an expert on at all, but I just want to give you an introduction on what skill development is all about and why it's important, keeping the wellness industry in mind. India has a population which is probably the youngest population in the world. 47% of our population is less than 29 years of age, and going up to almost 50% by 2022. Now, this is the slide that epitomizes the need for skill development in the country and why it's become a national agenda starting in 2009. So by 2022, India will have a population of 1.2 billion people, 700 million people in the age group below 29 years of age, and only 200 million people will go to colleges. So the rest of the 500 million will need some sort of an intervention to become employable or to become a productive part of the economy, and that's why skills becomes important. Now, before this NSDC was set up, which is a public-private partnership under India's Ministry of Finance to basically provide financial support for-profit business ventures for skill development, there was a detailed study done on the skills requirement across these 23 sectors. Now, if you look at salons, which would form part of the unorganized sector here at the bottom right of my slide, 37.8 million people required over the next 10 years. So that's the quantum of skills that we're talking about. As a general perspective about the industry, the capacity for skills training in the country stands at 4.3 million people. And if you looked at the previous slide, India needs more than 300 million people across these 23 sectors. So we need to augment our skills capacity or skills training capacity by almost 8 to 10 times, which makes a market of almost $20 billion. How do you get to that $20 billion? If you take 5,000 rupees to train a person on average, and to train 300 million people in the next 10 years, you'll get to that figure of $20 billion. Now what would the NSDC look for? As I said, we have been set up to support and incubate for-profit ventures in skill development. So we are looking for any business plan to train at least 50,000 people in the next 10 years with 70% employment, and NSDC would support that business plan by up to 75% of funding, with 25% coming in from your side. This is what the industry size is, almost $15 billion, growing at a healthy rate. There are 1 million people working in the sector as of now. Now, if you have to do a market segmentation, there are two ways of doing it. One is dividing the market by way of products, skincare products, cosmetics, etc., and services, which is all kinds of therapies, spas, gyms, etc. So 53% of this $15 billion would be services, and the rest of it would be product. Now, what's the dynamic like of the wellness sector? 50% or more is highly unorganized. So there's a massive opportunity for organized players to come in and organize the market. We see an increasing spend towards wellness because of the demographic dividend that I talked about, and the increasing salaries that people see and will continue to see over the time to come. So coming to the skills perspective, by 2015, this is the data I had or I could conjure up. Almost 3 million people have the potential to get hired in this industry. But as far as the shortage of skills is concerned, there's a shortage of 600,000 people, growing at a 20% per annum rate. Now, talking about widening the market, very simple facts: increasing urbanization, increasing incomes, and increasing media penetration, which will continue to see increasing spends in the industry. Now, coming back to the first bit that I talked about skills, there's a huge gap, there's a huge demand, and there's a requirement for a lot of people in this industry. Now, what are the problems in the sector? People don't see vocational skills at par with education. Today everybody wants to go to college and get a degree. Whether it gets them a job or not, that doesn't really matter. But if you talk to the same person to go take a short-term vocational training course, he would not be interested. So that's the main problem in the sector. Vocational skills is not aspirational. Second, if you have to go for a higher education degree, there would be any bank ready to finance you. If you have to go for a short-term vocational training degree, you won't have any bank to actually back you up. That's the second problem. The third thing would be quality of training. Industry keeps talking about the fact that I don't get people based on the skills that I require. The training given is not relevant. So that's another problem. Skills need to be aligned to the industry needs. And fourthly, student mobilization. There are not enough students who want to take up vocational training as a result of these three factors that I just talked about. Now, one last slide that I wanted to end this presentation with was an introduction to something called the World Skills Competition, which is like the Skills Olympics held every 2 years across the world. So there are 23 skills that people compete for, including beauticians, including hairstylists, to basically become the best in that skill across the world. So in 2013, this competition will be held in Leipzig in Germany, where India will be participating in almost 20 of these listed skills that I'm talking about, including beauticians and including the hairstylist competition. Now, making skills aspirational, whether it's for the wellness industry, whether it's for salons, or whether it's for anything else, skills has to be showcased at a global level. And if India is able to win medals at this competition, I think that's going to trickle down to making skills aspirational and, getting us to that objective.